Now in this part we'll start talking about oral medicine, right? Now oral medicine and oral path, both these branches are interlinked, and many times you will see similar questions both in oral medicine and oral pathology. However, oral medicine deals mostly with the management of common lesions, right, and their important diagnostic characteristic features, and that is what I will be telling you in this LMRP session, right? So when we start with oral medicine, it becomes very important to know about these important definitions, because many of the times these important definitions also come as MCQs in your exam, right? For example, we all know, I'm sure you all are aware of that, what are macules. That macules are well circumscribed, they are flat lesion. Now this term is very important, that macule is well circumscribed. However, a flat lesion that is only noticeable because of their change in color, right? And they can be red if any vascular lesions or inflammation is present, or maybe pigmented if melanin associated lesions are present, right? So they are only noticeable only because of their change in color, right? On the other hand, if we talk about these papules, so these papules are solid lesions which are raised above the skin. That means they are solid, they do not have any fluid inside, they are solid lesions. And remember that the only important thing that to be remembered by you is that they are smaller than 1 centimeter in diameter. So papules are very small in size. They are smaller than 1 centimeter in diameter, but they are solid raised lesions, right? Papules are one of the common primary lesions in variety of diseases, like you can see papules even in erythema multiforme, in lupus erythematosus, in sarcoidosis. In many diseases you will find papules as primary lesions, right? Remember this, if you see multiple papules somewhere, so we usually say that if multiple papules are present in the oral cavity, either on the gingiva or on the tongue, they give this characteristic cobblestone appearance. This cobblestone appearance is because of presence of multiple papules, and this cobblestone appearance is seen mainly and most importantly in Crohn's disease, which is a GIT disorder. Apart from Crohn's disease, it is seen in Hicks disease. Now Hicks disease stands for focal epithelial hyperplasia. Cobblestone appearance is also seen in a syndrome which is called as Cowden syndrome. It is basically also called as multiple hematoma syndrome. Apart from Cowden syndrome, this cobblestone appearance is also seen in Darier's disease. This Darier's disease this Darier's disease is also called as dyskeratosis follicularis. It is because of vitamin A deficiency, right? So in all these four, Crohn's disease, Hicks disease, Cowden syndrome, Darier's disease, you will find this cobblestone appearance formed because of multiple papules in clusters together, right? So if you see this kind of cobblestone appearance on gingiva or on the tongue, please think about these diseases that patient might be having any of the following pathology. But most commonly it is seen in Crohn's disease. If they ask you that cobblestone appearance is seen in all, but most commonly seen in, then your answer will be this Crohn's disease. Please remember this thing, right? Talking about plaque, then plaque are large papules. These are large papules. That means they are solid raised lesions, but they are over 1 centimeter in diameter. So they are large papules, right? Like for example, these plaques you see in leukoplakia. We usually say that leukoplakia presents as a patch or a plaque, right? Now nodule is a deeper lesion. So this nodule is one lesion which is deeper, which is deep inside the dermis, and epidermis can easily be moved over them. So any deeper solid lesion is nothing but a nodule, right? Talking about vesicles and bulla, so these vesicles and bulla are fluid filled lesions. These are fluid filled lesions which are filled with clear fluid, right? Only difference is that vesicle is less than 1 centimeter in diameter, whereas bullae is more than 1 centimeter in diameter. We call them as blisters containing clear fluid, right? Vesicle is less than 1 centimeter in diameter, whereas bulla is more than 1 centimeter in diameter. Also remember that vesicle is a primary lesion which is seen in herpes simplex virus infection, right? Or herpes zoster virus infection, whereas bulla is a primary lesion which is seen basically in pemphigus or pemphigoid, right? So these are also some important, very easy definitions, very simple things, but yet it is important for you to remember these things. That is why I have started with these simple definitions for you to remember, right? Coming on to the next slide, here I have classified ulcerative vesiculobullous lesions. Now, why it was important for me to classify these ulcerative vesicular bullous lesion? It is because many a times problem based question comes as your MCQs. For example, a patient may there could be a problem based question that a patient presents with multiple oral ulcers of short duration with lot of hemorrhagic crusting of lips. So with intraoral diffuse lesions. Now these diffuse lesions and even crusting of lips can be seen in erythema multiforme, can be seen even in pemphigus vulgaris. Now how to differentiate? We can only differentiate on the basis of duration. The question was of short duration. That means those diffuse ulcers are acute in onset. So the answer will be erythema multiforme. If I would have said patient presents with diffuse oral ulcers since past 6 months, that means those ulcers are chronic. So such presentation of chronic ulcers are definitely of pemphigus vulgaris, right? So it is important to know that which ulcers present as acute multiple ulcers, right? So example of acute multiple ulcers, that means multiple ulcers of short duration, are as follows. We have herpes simplex virus, we have herpes zoster virus infection, we have Coxsackie virus infection, then ANAG, erythema multiforme, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, aphthous stomatitis, and allergic reactions. These are example of acute multiple ulcers. You know this, that herpes simplex virus causes herpetic gingivostomatitis. Now this herpetic gingivostomatitis is mainly seen in children, and therefore it is called as primary herpetic gingivostomatitis. There are always presence of prodromal symptoms first, then after 3-4 days the child present with multiple vesicles in clusters. These vesicles which were present in clusters, they break or burst in another 2 to 3 days and convert into irregular map-like lesions, right? Remember this, that once this virus enters the body, it remains latent inside the body, and whenever the immunity is compromised of that individual, this virus causes once again this herpetic gingivostomatitis. So second time, if a patient is developing herpetic gingivostomatitis because of decreased immunity, it is called as recrudescent herpes infection. And if this herpes infection keep on occurring again and again, then we call it as recurrent herpetic infection, right? You all are aware of these small things, and you also know this, that the drug of choice in herpes simplex virus infection is acyclovir, which we can use as a topical cream, that is 5%, or if you want to give systemic acyclovir, our dose is 200 to 400 milligrams, and we give at least 5 times a day, right? If it is in a child, then we usually give 200 milligrams 5 times a day. If it is in an adult, we give 400 milligrams 5 times a day. And if we would like to give valacyclovir, then the valacyclovir dose is either we give 1000 milligrams twice a day, or you can give 500 milligrams also 3 times a day. So that is the dose of acyclovir and valacyclovir in herpes simplex virus infection. You all know, if herpetic infection is caused in the hands of the dentist, because if without gloves, if that dentist or if the dentist is working on a patient with active herpes infection, that is called as herpetic vitiligo. That infection in the hands is called as herpetic vitiligo. You all are aware of it, right? Talking about herpes zoster virus infection. So this herpes zoster virus, which is also called as varicella zoster virus, in children it causes chickenpox. In adults it causes herpes zoster virus infection. Now this herpes zoster virus infection, again, always you should remember this, and it is very important also that this herpes zoster infection is characterized by development of vesicles and then the ulcers, but these vesicles and ulcers are always unilateral. Now this is very important, that they are always unilateral. Herpetic gingivostomatitis is always bilateral, occurs on mainly on the keratinized mucosa involving gingiva and hard palate, but herpes zoster virus always occurs unilaterally, right? The virus, this herpes zoster virus, when it enters the body, it remains latent in the dorsal root ganglion. It usually involves the trigeminal nerve, and if we see which branch of trigeminal nerve is most commonly involved, then the ophthalmic division of trigeminal nerve is most commonly involved in herpes zoster virus infection, followed by maxillary division and then the mandibular division, right? The lesions are in the dermatomal fashion. That means they follow the course of the nerve, always unilateral. Same patient will have prodromal symptoms. Then there will be development of vesicles, which will then burst out into secondary lesions that are ulcers, which are irregular, right? Intraorally, you can see these ulcers on the palate, but only unilaterally. On the tongue, but only unilateral, right? In the treatment of herpes zoster virus, again, we give acyclovir systemically, but this time the dose is not 200 or 400. Acyclovir is given as 800 milligrams at least 5 times a day. So please remember, in herpes zoster infection, the dose of acyclovir is 800 milligrams 5 times a day. Please do not forget this, right? And then you all know the two important complications of herpes zoster virus infection is either there is development of post-herpetic neuralgia, that is the pain that persists for more than 3 months. The lesions disappear, but that pain persists, that is post-herpetic neuralgia, that is treated by gabapentin 300 milligrams at least thrice a day. So drug of choice for post-herpetic neuralgia is gabapentin, right? The second important complication associated with herpes zoster virus infection is a syndrome. You all know it, that is James Ramsay Hunt syndrome, which is characterized by a triad. And in the triad, what do we have? The patient have facial palsy. There is loss of taste sensation in anterior 2/3 of tongue, and there are vesicles or lesions on the external ear. Now, why facial palsy is present in Ramsay-Hunt syndrome when we all know that herpes zoster virus infection involves the trigeminal nerve? It is because this herpes zoster virus infection when involves this geniculate ganglion. When this geniculate ganglion gets involved when with herpes zoster virus, then because facial nerve is associated with this geniculate ganglion, so facial nerve gets involved, and because of this patient develops facial palsy, and along with facial palsy patient also have loss of taste sensation on anterior two-thirds of tongue because chorda tympani gets involved, which is again a branch of facial nerve, and patient also have lesions on external ear. Please remember this thing, that in Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, the nerve involved is facial nerve because this virus involves this geniculate ganglion, right? Talking about Coxsackie virus, now this Coxsackie virus causes two important diseases. One is called as herpengina, and the other one is called as hand, foot, and mouth disease. These are two important diseases which are caused by Coxsackie virus. Please remember this specifically. Coxsackie virus A16 causes this hand, foot, and mouth disease. This is a very commonly asked question, that which Coxsackie virus causes hand, foot, and mouth disease. So it is Coxsackie virus A16 which causes this hand, foot, and mouth disease. Please remember, the lesions of herpingina and hand, foot, and mouth disease are always seen on the posterior part of oral cavity. Lesions of herpes are seen in the anterior part of the oral cavity, mainly on hard palate and gingiva, whereas lesions of herpingina and hand, foot, or mouth disease are seen in the posterior part of oral cavity, mainly involving the pharynx, soft palate, uvula, etc. Right? This is how we can differentiate between these two viruses and their associated diseases. Right? Talking about ENUG, you all know this is acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. This is fusospirachetal infection. You all know that again due to compromised immunity, right, and patient because of unhealthy hygienic condition, patient develops multiple punched out ulcers in the interdental papilla along with fever, lymphadenopathy, fetid odor, metallic taste, etc. And the treatment of choice is that in the first visit we do not start with scaling, but in the first visit we just do gentle debridement along with prescription of your penicillin, metronidazole, right? We can give chlorhexidine, digluconate, mouth rinses. We can give hydrogen peroxide rinses, right? And once the infection subside, then we go for your oral prophylaxis and route planning, right? Talking about erythema multiforme and Stevens-Johnson syndrome, at one point of time, Stevens-Johnson syndrome was said to be as the severe form of erythema multiforme, but now the recent edition of Burkitt has separated them. They have said that erythema multiforme is basically caused because of herpes simplex virus infection. You all know that erythema multiforme and Stevens-Johnson syndrome are basically hypersensitivity reactions. That too, they are delayed type 4 hypersensitivity reactions. Erythema multiforme is usually caused by herpes simplex virus or usually aggravated by herpes simplex virus and less commonly by the drugs. However, Stevens-Johnson syndrome is most commonly caused by drugs, right? So if someone asks you what is the difference between the two, so remember that erythema multiforme is usually caused because of herpes simplex virus, whereas Stevens-Johnson syndrome is usually associated with drugs, medications, right? About aphthous stomatitis, I'm sure you all know this, that we have three types of aphtha. We have aphthous minor, we have aphthous major, we have herpetiform ulcers which resemble herpes, right? You also know that aphthous is not any viral or any bacterial infection. It is basically an autoimmune disorder which is aggravated by stress, GIT disorders, any nutritional deficiency, any trauma. All these factors aggravate this autoimmune disorder called as aphthous stomatitis. Remember that major aphthous stomatitis is called as Sutton's disease, right? And it is usually recurrent. You all know about aphthous, that it is a beautiful ulcer, that round, shallow, well-defined ulcer having that characteristic erythematous halo, right? If we need to differentiate between a herpetic ulcer and aphthous stomatitis, we say that herpetic ulcers are irregular, mainly seen on keratinized mucosa, on gingiva and hard palate, whereas aphthous ulcers or aphthous stomatitis is having they are very neat, well defined round ulcers having those characteristic erythematous halo, that is center is white surrounded by area of erythema, and basically aphthae are commonly seen on non-keratinized mucosa in contrary, right? And basically on labial mucosa, tongue, soft palate, that is the common site of aphthae. And gingiva and hard palate is the common site of herpes, right? And aphthae we manage while using steroids, by using gastric mucosa protector, right, like ribamipide, using tetracycline mouth rinses, or any anti-inflammatory paste like Amlexanox paste, using multivitamins with zinc. We can give immunomodulators like Dapsone, which is actually an the Dapsone is an anti-leprotic drug, but it is used as an immunomodulator in aphthae. You can also try thalidomide, which is again nowadays again commonly used in the treatment of aphthous stomatitis. Talking about allergic reactions, we know that we have allergic stomatitis, a lot of allergic different reactions because of many things are seen in the oral cavity. So they also present in the form of acute multiple ulcers, right? Coming on to the next part of this classification, that is chronic multiple ulcers. So talking about these chronic multiple ulcers, now we know that, as I've already told you, now these ulcers are chronic, that is of long duration, again, but multiple, chronic multiple ulcers. And in this we have pemphigus, bullous pemphigoid, mucous membrane pemphigoid, epidermolysis bullosa, and linear IgA disease, right? Remember that pemphigus vulgaris, bullous pemphigoid, mucous membrane pemphigoid, they are autoimmune disorders. Again, they are autoimmune disorders, and they have their definite presentations. How to differentiate between these two specifically, I've made a tabular form which I will show in the coming slides. So at that time we will discuss them, right? Talking about recurrent oral ulcers, we are talking about those ulcers which keep on reoccurring again and again, right? And the examples of recurrent oral ulcers, or most commonly occurring recurrent oral ulcers, are recurrent herpetic ulcers, recurrent aphthous stomatitis, this Behçet's disease, cyclic neutropenia, and sometimes, because nowadays we say that erythema multiforme is caused by herpes simplex virus, therefore we also have this recurrent erythema multiforme, right? We already have distinguished or differentiated herpes infection from aphthous stomatitis. We know that recurrent hepatic ulcers are seen on keratinized mucosa. The ulcers are irregular, and the recurrent aphthous ulcers or aphthous stomatitis is seen on non-keratinized mucosa. Ulcers are well defined, shallow, round, having that characteristic erythematous halo, right? And we know that one is autoimmune and other is called as caused by virus. So prodromal symptoms will be present in hepatic infection. We usually do not have any prodromal symptoms like fever, malaise, vomiting, diarrhea in aphthous stomatitis. If at all something is present, then it is burning sensation only, right? Talking about Behçet's disease, now Behçet's disease is characterized by a triad. It is characterized by a triad. That means these patients have recurrent oral ulcers. These patients have recurrent ocular ulcers, and these patients have recurrent genital ulcers. So any patient who comes to you with the chief complaint of recurrent oral ulcers, recurrent ocular ulcers and recurrent genital ulcers, then we make the diagnosis as Behcet's disease or Behcet syndrome, right? Remember, there is a very important test which is positive in this Behcet syndrome, that is called as Pethergy test. If someone asks you where do you see this Pethergy test or Pethergy test is positive in which disease, our answer will be Behcet's disease, right? Talking about cyclic neutropenia, now it is a blood dyscrasia in which after every, now this is very important, after every 21 days or after every 3 weeks, patient develops ulcers because after every 21 days the neutrophil counts decreases in these patients. So after every 21 days patient will have fever and patient will have oral ulcers. If this is present, that too in a cyclic manner occurring after every 21 days, then we make the diagnosis as cyclic neutropenia. Please remember that, right? And lastly, yes, very correctly we know that recurrent erythema multiforme is also commonly, erythema multiforme is also recurrent sometimes because it is said to be caused by herpes simplex virus infection, right? Coming on to the last part of this classification, again we are talking about chronic ulcers, but this time the ulcer is chronic but single. Now when the ulcer is chronic and single, then it becomes dangerous. That means I am talking about chronic single ulcer. The most common example of chronic single ulcer is traumatic ulcer, which is most common ulcer seen in the oral cavity. It is because of any trauma due to sharp cusp or any orthodontic or prosthodontic appliance. Yes, malignant ulcer can also be present in the oral cavity. We need to look carefully if the ulcer is having everted edges, if the ulcer is having everted edges, if the ulcer is having indurated base. Indurated base means hard base, right? Then we usually suspect malignancy. So a chronic ulcer specifically on the lateral border of tongue or on the floor of the mouth usually is dangerous, suspicious of malignant ulcer. We can go for toluidine blue staining, where what do we do in toluidine blue staining? First we clean that area with 1% acetic acid, then we apply 1% toluidine blue solution. If that blue color is retained, after that patient is asked to rinse. After rinsing, if that blue color retains, it usually suggests that dysplasia is present and maybe this ulcer is malignant, right? Similarly, we can go for some light based investigations like Visilight, and Wellscope. Now these Visilight and Wellscope are again cancer diagnostic aids. In Visilight, remember, it is based on the principle of chemiluminescence. Visilight is based on the principle of chemiluminescence, whereas Wellscope is based on the principle of autofluorescence. So these questions can be asked in your exam, that which light-based cancer diagnostic modality is based on autofluorescence. Your answer will be Wellscope. And which light-based cancer detection aid is based on chemiluminescence, then your answer will be Visilight. Now Visilight is like a torch. When you throw it on the lesion, if dysplasia is present, that area appears bright and the normal mucosa appears dark. On the other hand, when you use Wellscope, then blue excitation light falls on that area, and the area where dysplasia is present, now that area appears dark. The area where dysplasia is present, when we use Wellscope, that area appears dark, and the normal mucosa, however, the surrounding normal mucosa, however, it appears green. That is about Wellscope. So these are important cancer diagnostic aids which help in the diagnosis of your malignant ulcer, which is must know for you all, right? Talking about syphilitic ulcer, now syphilis is not very common these days. However, we all know that primary syphilis, in primary syphilis, the most common lesion seen is chancre, And this chancre is a painless ulcer which is always painless, and this chancre is commonly seen in the genital region, but nowadays because of unnatural sexual practices it can also be seen on lip and on the tongue, but it is always painless, right? So it can present as a chronic single ulcer. Similarly, remember in secondary syphilis, we have lot many manifestations, oral manifestations, like we have mucus patches, which are very infected, right? We have snail track ulcers, you all know this. We have a split papule at the corner of the mouth. You all know this, that the malignant form of syphilis or widespread form of syphilis is also seen in secondary syphilis, that is called as Leus maligna, right? And like all this you should know, and very commonly asked questions on secondary syphilis, right? In tertiary syphilis, you all know that the most common lesion which is seen on the palate is gumma, and this gumma is seen in tertiary syphilis mainly on the palate, and it is a very destructive lesion which can cause palatal perforation, right? Also remember, in tertiary syphilis we have something called as syphilitic glossitis. The syphilitic glossitis is a potentially malignant condition and can convert into oral squamous cell carcinoma. And it is present where? It is present in tertiary syphilis. And you know, in congenital syphilis we have that characteristic Hutchinson's triad, having those, you know, moon-shaped molars, mulberry molars, right? And we have eighth nerve damage and interstitial keratitis. So this is must know regarding syphilitic ulcers and syphilis for all of you. Talking about tubercular ulcer, now tuberculosis also have its oral manifestation in the form of ulcer, which is most commonly seen on the tongue. Now this tubercular ulcer can be painful also and painless also, right? And lastly, in chronic single ulcers, we have chronic fungal ulcers. We have chronic fungal ulcers like mucormycosis, like histoplasmosis, and these chronic fungal ulcers also present as single, you know, ulcers which can cause perforation. Like for example, if I talk about mucormycosis, this is very important for your exam point of view, that mucormycosis is basically seen on the palate. It is seen in diabetic patients, in those patients who have uncontrolled diabetes, and it is seen on the palate, and it also causes palatal perforation because जो fungus होता है, it attacks the blood vessels. The vascular supply to the palate is cut off, leading to palatal perforation. So remember this, that mucormycosis is seen on the palate in patients with uncontrolled diabetes. So this much you should know regarding chronic single ulcers, right? So let us see the most common questions which are asked in your exam on ulcerative lesions. First of all, we have discussed this that before also, and now I'm sure it will be easy for us to revise that herpes simplex virus is an important etiological agent for erythema multiforme. We have discussed this. If we talk about Stevens-Johnson syndrome, it is more likely to be associated with medication use. But erythema multiforme nowadays is said to be caused by herpes simplex virus infection. And we know that the most common lesions seen on the skin in erythema multiforme, are the target lesions. They are also called as iris lesions, or also called as bull's eye lesions, right? Again, we have discussed this, that hand, foot and mouth disease is caused by Coxsackie virus, and specifically caused by Coxsackie virus A16, right? Talking about herpangina, again we have discussed this, that it is caused by Coxsackie virus, and lesions are mainly seen on the posterior part of the oral cavity, that is oropharynx, soft palate and tonsillar pillars, right? So if someone asks you the question the other way, that erythema and vesicles on oropharynx, soft palate and tonsillar pillar is characteristic of, your answer will be herpangina, right? Again, talking about Stevens-Johnson syndrome, it is more likely to be associated with, we have discussed this now, that it is more likely to be associated with medication use. Also remember one important etiological agent which is mentioned in Burkitt, that is called as Mycoplasma pneumoniae. So Stevens-Johnson syndrome can also be likely to be associated with Mycoplasma pneumoniae infection, right? Yes, we have discussed regarding herpes zoster also, that it is unilateral, linear, clustered distribution of vesicles and ulcer in the dermatome supplied by one nerve. That is why it is always unilateral. Yes. About cyclic neutropenia also we have discussed that ulcers occur after every 21 days, and that means that condition is cyclic neutropenia. And recurrent oral, genital and ocular ulcers are characteristic of, we have discussed this, Behçet's disease, and we know this that Petherji test is positive in this Behçet disease. And what is Sutton's disease? It is major aphthous stomatitis. The other name for major aphthous stomatitis is this Sutton's disease, right? On the next slide, now you see this table that how we differentiate or how we can differentiate between pemphigus vulgaris and bullous pemphigoid. Please remember that both of them are autoimmune disorders, but you all know that intraepithelial lesions are seen in pemphigus vulgaris. Subepithelial lesions are seen in bullous pemphigoid, right? You all know this, and you have learned this in oral pathology also. Acantholysis term is used for pemphigus vulgaris. It is because of this acantholysis the cells separate from each other and we see the intra epithelial lesions, the lesions which is above the basement membrane. Whereas in bullous pemphigoid, what happens is the autoantibodies are bound to basement membrane, which break off, because of which lesions are always from subepithelial. So both of them almost have similar clinical features. Please remember the only difference is that lesions are intraepithelial in pemphigus vulgaris and subepithelial in bullous pemphigoid. Both have primary lesions as bulla. The only important thing is that there are two important signs which are usually absent in bullous pemphigoid and usually present in pemphigus vulgaris, and you all know this. One is Nikolsky's sign and one is Asbo-Hansen sign. Now Nikolsky's sign is, you all know this, that on pressing the normal mucosa or normal skin, a fresh lesion appears. That is the Nikolsky sign, which is usually present in pemphigus vulgaris and not present in bullous pemphigoid, right? Also remember this, Nikolsky sign is also seen in, apart from pemphigus vulgaris, in familial pemphigus, which is called as Hailey-Hailey disease, in toxic epidermal necrolysis, and also in staphylococcal scalded skin syndrome. So in many other diseases, you find this Nikolsky sign. Talking about what is Asbo-Hansen sign, it is a bulla spread sign, that when you apply pressure onto a bulla, it spreads peripherally, right? So that is Asbo-Hansen sign. Again, it is positive in pemphigus vulgaris. And because this sign is positive, so lesions in pemphigus are large, they are diffuse, they are painful also, right? Whereas the lesions in bullous pemphigoid are smaller, they form slowly and they are less painful, right? And the last and very important difference, which is must know for all of you, is presence of desquamative gingivitis. Now this desquamative gingivitis is mainly present in bullous pemphigoid and mucous membrane pemphigoid, more common in that, and usually not present in pemphigus vulgaris. Absolutely absent nahi hoti, but usually not present in pemphigus vulgaris. You all know that desquamative gingivitis in itself is not a disease. It is a manifestation of one underlying autoimmune disorders mainly seen in bullous pemphigoid, mucous membrane pemphigoid, erosive lichen planus, and pemphigus vulgaris. Remember this thing, right? And then this is all oral path part, that you know that if you do even the immunofluorescence studies or you do the biopsy, you will get lesions where intraepithelial, and there you will get the lesions subepithelial, right? Now this much is must to know for all of you regarding these ulcerative diseases. These questions are commonly asked and you should be knowing it, right? Now in this part we will talk about potentially malignant disorders. You all know that like before we used to use these terms like pre-malignant lesions and pre-malignant conditions, but nowadays we use a single term for these pre-malignant lesions and conditions called as potentially malignant disorders, right? But yes, to understand it clearly, let us divide into this old classification and see, because in the national boards you will find these old classification only, right? So as per the old classification, we have pre-malignant lesions as well as pre-malignant conditions. Let us see what are the important pre-malignant lesions. Example are leukoplakia, erythroplakia, proliferative verrucous leukoplakia. Then important one is candidal leukoplakia, reverse smoking palate, verrucous hyperplasia, verrucous carcinoma, disc keratosis congenita, actinic cheilosis, and keratocanthoma. Now, amongst all potentially malignant disorder, please remember the latest Burkitt now says that PVL have the highest tendency to convert into malignancy, followed by erythroplakia. Then we have speckled leukoplakia. Then we have OSMF, and least chances are of lichen planus. Only 0.2 to 2% chances are associated with lichen planus. So least malignant potential is in lichen planus, and most malignant potential actually in proliferative verrucous leukoplakia and erythroplakia. Both have a big range, like PVL we say like 60 to even 100% cases can convert into malignancy. Erythroplakia again 50 to 80-90% can convert into malignancy. So it is very close, but because the recent table in Burkitt says that PVL has the highest tendency to convert into malignancy, so we will keep PVL first, followed by erythroplakia, then speckled leukoplakia, then OSMF, and then lichen planus, right? Leukoplakia, you know, is a white patch or plaque which you know that it is cannot be scraped off, and you all know that proliferative verrucous leukoplakia is one form of leukoplakia which is almost like we have homogeneous, non-homogeneous leukoplakia. It is almost a separate form of leukoplakia which have the highest tendency to convert into malignancy, right? You all know this. The most dangerous sites for leukoplakia to convert into malignancy is lateral border of the tongue, floor of the mouth, and ventral surface of the tongue. They are the high risk sites, right? You should know this, that they are the high risk site of leukoplakia, right? Talking about erythroplakia, it is a completely red lesion. It is a completely red lesion and commonly seen on the palate with high malignant transformation rate. And we have discussed this regarding proliferative verrucous leukoplakia. It has the highest tendency to convert into malignancy. Please remember the most common site of proliferative verrucous leukoplakia is usually gingiva. In fact, the lower or mandibular gingiva is the most common site for proliferative verrucous leukoplakia. Now, candidal leukoplakia is a form of candidiasis. It is not leukoplakia. It is a form of candidiasis which is not scrapable. We all know that candida is scrapable. Candidiasis is scrapable. But this candidal leukoplakia, which is also called as chronic hyperplastic candidiasis, is non-scrapable variant of oral candidiasis and has pre-malignant potential. Similarly, reverse smoking palate, verrucous hyperplasia, verrucous carcinoma. I hope you all know the other name for verrucous carcinoma is your Ackermann's tumor. This also you should know. And you know that keratoacanthoma is also called as self-healing ulcer or self-healing carcinoma. Basically, it also have but very less tendency. It can heal also. And actinic cheilosis is seen in sailors or farmers who work in sunlight, and it is also potentially malignant, right? Amongst P-malignant conditions, we have our very own lichen planus, DLE. We have, after DLE, we have epidermolysis bullosa, cheilitis glandularis, xeroderma pigmentosum, syphilis third stage. We have already discussed this. Because of presence of syphilitic glossitis, the syphilitic glossitis can convert into oral squamous cell carcinoma. Plummer-Vinson syndrome, you know, it is associated with iron deficiency anemia. Patient is having esophageal webs. Because of that, patient is having dysphagia, and these esophageal webs can convert into malignancy. Even malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, OSMF, and even immunosuppressive diseases like HIV, they all are said to be pre-malignant conditions. That means if these conditions are present in the body, there are increased chances that patient might develop malignancy, right? Okay. Now this hairy leukoplakia is a different type of leukoplakia. It is not exactly that, it is not that same leukoplakia which is caused because of smoking. This hairy leukoplakia is absolutely different leukoplakia which is caused by Epstein-Barr virus. Now this Epstein-Barr virus is a very important virus because a lot of questions are asked in context with this Epstein-Barr virus. Remember this, that it causes infectious mononucleosis, that is also called as kissing disease or glandular fever, right? You also know this, that monospot test and Paul Bunner test are seen or are used in infectious mononucleosis. Also, you know that Epstein-Barr virus causes this nasopharyngeal carcinoma, which is associated with Trotter syndrome. Also, the lymphomas, Hodgkin, non-Hodgkin's, Burkitt's, all have one or the other etiology as Epstein-Barr virus. And similarly, this Epstein-Barr virus also causes hairy leukoplakia. Last year, this question had come that it is also called as Greenspan lesion. So if someone asks you what is Greenspan lesion, it is oral hairy leukoplakia caused by Epstein-Barr virus, commonly seen on the lateral surface of the tongue. Ventral पे भी नहीं, mainly seen on the lateral surface of the tongue, mainly in the immunodeficiency patients like HIV patient, and caused by Epstein-Barr virus. Please remember this much regarding hairy leukoplakia, right? Systemic lupus erythematosus and discoid lupus erythematosus both are autoimmune disorders. Like they are having that butterfly rash. Now this Epstein-Barr virus is a very important virus because a lot of questions are asked in context with this Epstein-Barr virus. Remember this, that it causes infectious mononucleosis, that is also called as kissing disease or glandular fever, right? You also know this, that monospot test and Paul Bunner test are seen or are used in infectious mononucleosis. Also, you know that Epstein-Barr virus causes this nasopharyngeal carcinoma, which is associated with Trotter syndrome. Also, the lymphomas, Hodgkin, non-Hodgkin's, Burkitt's, all have one or the other etiology as Epstein-Barr virus. And similarly, this Epstein-Barr virus also causes hairy leukoplakia. Last year, this question had come that it is also called as Greenspan lesion. So if someone asks you what is Greenspan lesion, it is oral hairy leukoplakia caused by Epstein-Barr virus, commonly seen on the lateral surface of the tongue. Ventral पे भी नहीं, mainly seen on the lateral surface of the tongue, mainly in the immunodeficiency patients like HIV patient, and caused by Epstein-Barr virus. Please remember this much regarding hairy leukoplakia, right? Systemic lupus erythematosus and discoid lupus erythematosus both are autoimmune disorders. Like they are having that butterfly rash. If we talk about DLE, then intraorally the DLE lesions are just like lichen planus lesions. That means they also have striae, but the only difference is that in DLE there is one central atrophic area from where we see radiating striae like in the form of sunray appearance. So this also you should know that DLE is the first differential diagnosis of lichen planus, right? Talking about SLE, now multiple organ involvement is seen in SLE, and remember this is a very commonly asked question, that where do you see non-erosive symmetric arthritis? So non-erosive symmetric arthritis is commonly seen in AA in this SLE. Also one question is commonly asked, that anti-nuclear antibody test, ANA test, is positive in all autoimmune disorder, be it Sjogren syndrome, be it any other autoimmune disorder, it is usually positive. But always and maximum time it is most commonly positive in SLE. So regarding this SLE, please remember these two things, that one important finding is presence of non-erosive symmetric arthritis, and the second important finding is ANA test is always commonly positive in SLE or systemic lupus erythematosus. Then you should know what is Koebner's phenomenon, which is seen in lichen planus and psoriasis. Now this Koebner's phenomenon is the appearance of skin lesions on the lines of trauma. Wherever trauma is there, you find new skin lesion which is present in the cases mainly of lichen planus and psoriasis. So these are two important lesions where you usually find this Koebner's phenomenon, that is the appearance of skin lesions in the line of trauma, right? Then you should know regarding lichen planus, that lichen planus is an autoimmune disorder which is again aggravated mainly by stress, but nowadays it is said to be caused by hepatitis C virus. So even hepatitis C virus is said to be associated with lichen planus as one of its etiology apart from stress. Main etiology is autoimmunity, right? Remember two syndromes associated with lichen planus. One is the most common Greenspan syndrome. You know that in Greenspan syndrome we have a triad of lichen planus, hypertension and diabetes mellitus, right? The second syndrome which you need to remember is this one, Graham Little Picardy Lesueur syndrome or Graham Little Picardy syndrome. Again, it is associated with lichen planus, consists of lichen planus, skin lichen planus, maybe oral lesions are also present, but most important feature is alopecia of the scalp. Like there is a lot of hair loss of the scalp, even there is hair loss in axillary area, right? And maybe some follicular eruptions also seen. So if lichen planus is associated with alopecia or hair loss of scalp, axilla, pubic area, then it is Graham Little Picardy syndrome. So these two syndromes with lichen planus is must know for all of you, right? Coming on to the next slide, please remember this is also very important, that even after Epstein-Barr virus, you people should know regarding this human papilloma virus, because this human papilloma virus most commonly causes oral papilloma, verruca vulgaris or warts on the body, right? Condyloma acuminatum, right? But remember this, that human papilloma virus also causes oral squamous cell carcinoma, especially in the oropharyngeal region. And someone if asked that specifically which strain of human papilloma virus is associated with oral cancer, then remember this, human papilloma virus 16 and human papilloma virus 18 is mainly associated with oral cancer. Right? Again, we have discussed regarding cobblestone appearance. It is most commonly seen where? In Crohn's disease. Apart from it, it is also seen in Cowden syndrome, focal epithelial hyperplasia, that is also called as Heck's disease. I have discussed this with you before. Disc keratosis follicularis, that is also called as Darius disease, and also in Pyostomatitis vegetans. Even scleroderma, is one of the favorite question of examiners, and a lot of times many questions are asked on even on scleroderma. Remember that scleroderma is characterized by a mask-like face. There is presence of this Raynaud's phenomenon. What is Raynaud's phenomenon? There is vasospasm of the fingers and toes, usually in response to cold temperature or stress. Whenever there is a lot of winter is there, like a lot of cold climate is there, so there is vasospasm of the fingers and toes. Even if the patient is under a lot of stress, एकदम से anxiety हो गया है, Then also this there is vasospasm of fingers and toes in these patients of scleroderma. Also remember a very important syndrome associated with scleroderma, that is called as CREST syndrome, where C stands for, here it is written, calcinosis cutis, R stands for this Raynaud's phenomenon, E stands for esophageal dysmotility, S stands for sclerodactyly, not syndactyly. Syndactyly is fusion of fingers. Sclerodactyly is thickening of fingers. So sclerodactyly is present in scleroderma, not syndactyly. Sclerodactyly or thickening of fingers, and T stands for telangiectasia. So this CREST syndrome, which is seen as features of scleroderma. Sometimes they even ask you name one syndrome associated with scleroderma. Now CREST syndrome is seen in scleroderma, but the syndrome which is associated with scleroderma is Perry-Romberg syndrome. Very commonly asked question is this Perry-Romberg syndrome, where there is hemifacial atrophy of the face. एक तरफ का face is completely atrophied, right? Then remember this term cube de saber. This is like if I take a sword and make a mark. Such kind of linear scleroderma is called as cube de saber appearance, and when this cube de saber appearance or linear scleroderma advances, so that mark advances, it leads to hemifacial atrophy of face, and that is what is Perry-Romberg syndrome. That is why we say that this Perry-Romberg syndrome is associated with scleroderma. And we have discussed this also in radiology part when we were talking that generalized widening of periodontal ligament space is a very important feature of scleroderma. So many questions can be formed on this scleroderma, which is must know for all of you, right? Remember this thing, two very important okay, regarding treatment I will talk to you, important treatment drugs I will talk to you in another table, but remember at least these important diseases and their clinical features right now, right? Again, I have given one full slide to lymphangioma because it's a very commonly asked question, and you should know that lymphangioma is commonly seen in the oral cavity on tongue. That too, the most important presentation is that you see several translucent vesicles on the tongue, right? And we usually say that these several translucent vesicles with same color on the tongue, on the where it is mentioned, yeah, on the dorsal surface and lateral border of tongue, gives a characteristic tapioca pudding appearance. Now this tapioca pudding appearance is an appearance of frog eggs. So small translucent vesicles. Suppose this is the tongue. So on one part of the tongue you will see these multiple small translucent vesicles that resemble frog eggs. Tapioca pudding, right? Now this is the characteristic presentation of lymphangioma. So that is why I have given full slide for this. You might get a picture based question. So remember this thing that in the oral cavity, lymphangioma is common in the first decade of life and mostly occurs on the dorsal and lateral border of the tongue. Superficial lesions present as papillary lesions with pebbly surface due to occurrence of several translucent vesicles with same color as that of adjacent mucosa and occasionally with a mild reddish hue. Interestingly, they give a tapioca pudding or frog eggs like appearance. However, the deeper lesions manifest as diffuse nodules which are soft in consistency with negligible alteration in the color or texture, but these superficial lesions are very interesting and very commonly asked question in oral medicine, right? Next, let us talk about few important syndromes that are associated with pigmentation. Syndromes which is importantly associated with pigmentation. First, let us talk about the most common one, that is your Peutz-Jeghers syndrome. Please remember this Peutz-Jeghers syndrome. It is characterized by a triad of perioral pigmentation around the lips, Intestinal polyps. Now intestinal polyps are very dangerous. When these intestinal polyps are present, they easily convert into colon carcinoma. So this Peutz-Jeghers syndrome becomes potentially malignant, right? So we have written that right, the third part, that there is increased cancer susceptibility. So Peutz-Jeghers syndrome is characterized by perioral pigmentation, intestinal polyposis, and increased cancer susceptibility, right? Remember regarding cafe au lait spots also, now very important questions are asked on these cafe au lait spots. They are coffee with cream or coffee with milk like spots, which are mainly seen in McCune-Albright syndrome and in neurofibromatosis, even in Noonan syndrome and in tuberous sclerosis. Remember this thing, that cafe au lait spots or coffee with milk spots, when they are seen in Albright syndrome, the borders of these cafe au lait spots are irregular, and when the borders are irregular, we say that they resemble coast of Maine, because coast of Maine is irregular, right? Remember, in neurofibromatosis, these cafe au lait spots have smooth borders. In neurofibromatosis, these cafe au lait spots have smooth borders, and when smooth borders are present, we say they resemble coast of California. So, coast of California is the neurofibromatosis because of smooth borders, and coast of Maine because of irregular borders is seen in Albright syndrome, that is associated with fibrous dysplasia, right? Then this Leopard syndrome is again associated with oral and facial pigmentation characterized by L, that is multiple lentigines. Lentigines are freckles which do not fade away in winters. Then E stands for electrocardiographic conduction abnormalities. O stands for ocular hypertelorism, which is present. P stands for pulmonary stenosis. A stands for abnormal genitalia. R stands for retardation of growth, and D stands for deafness. So Leopard syndrome is characterized by so many features. It's an autosomal dominant disorder, and because multiple lentigines, that is because a lot of pigmentation is present, that is because of melanin. So this Leopard syndrome you should remember, right? Talking about Logier-Hunziker pigmentation, again this is important, characterized by perioral pigmentation of esophageal area, genital area, and conjunctival mucosa, and also some amount of nail involvement. So if oral or perioral pigmentation is associated with esophageal mucosal pigmentation, genital mucosal pigmentation, conjunctival mucosal pigmentation, and when nails are also involved, it becomes Logier-Hunziker pigmentation. Please remember this also, right? Now we know everything about Sjogren syndrome and your Plummer-Vinson syndrome. I'm very sure you all are aware of Sjogren syndrome and Plummer-Vinson syndrome. Fir bhi you should know what important questions are asked in both of them. Like for Sjogren syndrome, we know it's an autoimmune disorder associated with HLA system. Sometimes they ask that breakup time test is done in which pathology. Then this breakup time test is done for Sjogren syndrome. To check for eye secretions, we also do Schimmer's test. We also do Rose Bengal dye test, right? Again, ANA antibodies are present in Sjogren syndrome also, but mainly positive in systemic lupus erythematosus. Similarly, we have Ra and low autoantibodies. This is called as Sjogren syndrome A and Sjogren syndrome B at autoantibodies. If they are present, then it is suggestive of Sjogren syndrome. But the confirmatory investigation for Sjogren syndrome, remember, is this. That is lower labial gland biopsy. You have to do lower labial gland biopsy, and if you find lot of lymphocytic infiltration, this suggests that it is an autoimmune disorder, because chronic inflammation is there. These chronic lymphocytes are there, which are cells of chronic inflammation, and that will confirm your Sjogren syndrome. So if someone asks you which is the confirmatory investigation of Sjogren syndrome, your answer needs to be lower labial gland biopsy, right? Regarding Plummer-Vinson syndrome, please remember it has two other names, that it is also called as citrogenic dysphagia also called as Kelly-Peterson syndrome, and is characterized by, we have discussed this, iron deficiency anemia, esophageal webs because of which dysphagia is present, and definitely because these esophageal webs can convert into esophageal carcinoma, so it is associated with increased risk of malignancy. Many a times questions are asked on Plummer-Vinson syndrome and Sjogren syndrome. That is why I am revising you in this last minute revision points section, right? Very important syndrome is Trotter syndrome. I have discussed abhi थोड़ी देर पहले with you all that this nasopharyngeal carcinoma is caused by Epstein-Barr virus, and you know, when this nasopharyngeal carcinoma is present, patient is having lancinating kind of sharp shooting pain, and when sharp shooting lancinating pain is present in because of nasopharyngeal carcinoma, it is Trotter syndrome. Very important question. The Trotter syndrome is associated with nasopharyngeal carcinoma, or they can ask you, Trotter syndrome is associated with which virus? Your answer will be Epstein-Barr virus, right? Similarly, you know what is Eagle syndrome? Eagle syndrome is because of elongated styloid process. When the styloid process is elongated, patient is definitely having dysphagia, right? Remember this syndrome, the third which I am telling, this is associated with trigeminal neuralgia, and remember this, it is called as SUNCT syndrome. Now SUNCT S stands for short lasting, U stands for unilateral, N stands for neuralgiform headache, C stands for conjunctival injection, and T stands for tearing. So short lasting unilateral neuralgiform headache with conjunctival injection and tearing is SUNCT syndrome associated with trigeminal neuralgia. Patient is having, it's a kind of an headache disorder, and patient is having burning, stabbing, electrical headaches mainly near the eye, and typically these sensations are only on one side of the body. So if a patient of trigeminal neuralgia have more pain around the eye, going into the head, sharp shooting pain, with a lot of discharge even from the eyes, then this is SUNCT syndrome, that is short lasting unilateral neuralgiform headache with conjunctival injection and tearing, right? Also, please remember this thing regarding orofacial pain. This very important question is asked, that what is cluster headache? Now, cluster headache is phenopalatine neuralgia, also called as alarm clock headache, which occurs every day at the same time, and again it is sharp shooting pain, right? You all know this. Auriculotemporal syndrome is different. That is because of involvement of auriculotemporal nerve, and patient is having sweating while eating food, and that is your Frey syndrome, right? So these important things I'm sure you all are aware of, right? If we talk about facial palsy, so very importantly you should know syndromes associated with facial palsy, and most common syndrome associated with facial palsy is Melkersson-Rosenthal syndrome, which is characterized by facial palsy due to hypoplasia of parotid gland. Because of presence of hypoplasia of parotid gland, this facial palsy is present, plus these patients are having cheilitis, granulomatosa, and fissure tongue. So the triad of Melkersson-Rosenthal syndrome is facial palsy, fissure tongue, and cheilitis granulomatosa. Facial palsy is because of hypoplasia of parotid gland. So this question is easily asked, that where do you find hypoplasia of parotid gland? The answer is Melkersson-Rosenthal syndrome. The next syndrome with facial palsy is Hereford syndrome, also called as uveo-parotid fever. Patient is having bilateral enlargement of parotid gland, and sometimes facial palsy is also bilateral, or even sometimes it is unilateral. Patient is also having fever, but parotid glands are usually involved and inflamed, right? We have discussed this. Ramsay syndrome or James Ramsay syndrome is associated with facial palsy because facial nerve is involved, because herpes zoster virus involves the geniculate ganglion, because of which patient is having facial palsy. loss of taste sensation on anterior two-thirds of the tongue, and lesions on external ear. Lastly, Mobius syndrome is basically what? Mobius syndrome is basically congenital facial diplegia. That is, patients are usually born with congenital facial palsy, which is usually bilateral. So patient have that mask-like expressionless face. Sometimes these patients also have palsies of hypoglossal nerve, oculomotor nerve, and even this abducent nerve, right? So usually it is said to be as congenital facial diplegia with usually bilateral facial nerve palsies, right? So remember these syndromes associated with facial palsy. You all know the syndrome associated with double lip is Usher syndrome. Syndrome with talon cusp is Rubinstein-Tybee syndrome. With taurodontism, most commonly associated syndrome is Klinefelter syndrome. I've discussed this Cowden syndrome where we see that cobblestone appearance, remember, after Crohn's disease. This Cowden syndrome is multiple hematoma syndrome characterized by oral papillomatous lesions giving those cobblestone appearance. Face pay, we have trichomomas with GIT, thyroid, breast abnormalities. These patients have increased chances of cancer development, specifically in breast. Polyps are seen in GIT, which can convert into malignancy anytime, and even thyroid maybe patients are having hematomas and increased chances of cancer formation. That is your Cowden syndrome. The next important syndrome is Apert syndrome. You all know this, that Apert syndrome is characterized by syndactyly of hands and feet. Treacher-Collins syndrome is also called as mandibulofacial dysostosis, where there is hypoplasia of mandible. Usually there is bilateral underdevelopment of face, like because of hypoplasia of mandible, malar bone. There is malformation of external ear. There is anti-Mongolian slant because of underdevelopment of bilateral face. There is bird-like or fish-like face in the eye. Coloboma is present, and these are very important questions to diagnose this Treacher-Collins syndrome, right? Talking about Peary-Robin syndrome, you know this, that Peary-Robin syndrome is associated with a triad, that is cleft palate, micrognothia, and glossoptosis. Not cleft lip, only cleft palate, micrognothia, and glossoptosis. When this triad is present, we say that Peary-Robin syndrome is present. Marfan syndrome is characterized by these spidery fingers because the patient is long with long thin extremities. Even sometimes fingers are very long. That is why we call it as spidery fingers, right? You know this, what is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, also called as rubber man syndrome, because the patient have hyperelasticity or hyper flexibility of skin and joints. And if you take radiograph of these patients, you see multiple pulp stones. You see multiple pulp stones, right? Remember this, that one sign, important sign called as Gorlin sign, is positive in patients with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, that because these patients have high flexibility, these patients can protrude their tongue, and with their tongue they can touch their nose tip, which is not possible with mainly by normal people, but with patients with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome it is possible, and this is called as Golden sign. Next very important syndrome is this Papillon-Lefevre syndrome. Very important, characterized by juvenile periodontitis in a child. In an OPG, if you see periodontitis, that is juvenile periodontitis, and if you see Palmar-Plantar keratosis, then you know that it is Papillon-Lefevre syndrome. You can also see calcification of Fox cerebri, and remember this thing, that this Papillon-Lefevre syndrome is associated with cathepsin C mutation. Cathepsin C mutation. This question can be asked. Now these mutations and all these things usually you read in oral pathology, but just revising for all of you, remember about juvenile periodontitis and Palmar-Plantar keratosis at least. Next important syndrome is your Krausen syndrome. It is called as craniofacial dysostosis, characterized by craniosynostosis, that is early fusion of your skull sutures. There is presence of exophthalmos. Apart from this craniosynostosis, hypertelorism and exophthalmos is very prominent, remember, right? And if you take skull radiographs of these patients, I have discussed this in radiology many times, you will see this copper beaten appearance, also called as metal beaten appearance, also called as hammered copper appearance. And this Gordon-Gauss syndrome is associated with multiple OKCs. You have bifid rib, basal cell carcinoma, and even nevus also. We usually say it is multiple OKC, bifid rib, nevoid basal cell carcinoma syndrome, called as Gordon-Gauss syndrome. Again, a very commonly asked question. Cleidocranial dysplasia is again important because of presence of multiple impacted and supernumerary teeth. Multiple impacted and supernumerary teeth are seen in two important syndromes. One is cleidocranial dysplasia and the other one is your Gardner's syndrome. Other one is your Gardner's syndrome. The only difference is that in cleidocranial dysplasia, you also find hypoplasia of clavicle, or sometimes there is absence of clavicle. You see presence of Wormian bones. The fontanelle, especially the frontal or the anterior fontanelle, is open because there is delayed closure of these fontanelle. Also remember that there is absence of cellular cementum. If you make a ground section of the extracted teeth, you will find that in these patients, cementum, that is cellular cementum, is absent, right? And these patients have multiple impacted and supernumerary teeth, which you will easily see in an OPG. So please remember these many features associated with cleidocranial dysplasia: multiple impacted supernumerary teeth, hypoplasia or absence of clavicle, presence of Wormian bones. Wormian bones are newly formed bones, right? Delayed closure of fontanelles, absence of cellular cementum. The other syndrome associated with multiple impacted teeth is your Gardner syndrome, where apart from multiple impacted and supernumerary teeth, you also have multiple osteomas, intestinal polyps, and dermoid or epidermoid cysts. Because of presence of intestinal polyps, again, your Gardner syndrome is potentially malignant because these intestinal polyps can convert into your colon carcinoma. And we have discussed this Peutz-Jeghers syndrome associated with perioral pigmentation and intestinal polyps. Quickly revising about syphilis, I've already discussed this, but again, there's a short this slide has this, so please read this. That in primary syphilis we have painless chancre. In secondary stage of syphilis we have mucus patches. Now the secondary stage of syphilis is said to be most infective stage of syphilis. Apart from this, we have a split papule. We can have this split papule at corner of lip, something called as condyloma lata. Now condyloma lata is a wart-like structure which is seen in the genital area, but it is basically caused by the syphilis called as condyloma lata. Presence of snail track ulcers, ulcers formed one behind the other. Again, it's seen in secondary syphilis. I've discussed this, that the widespread form called as Leus maligna is also one characteristic feature of your secondary syphilis. In tertiary syphilis, you have gamma, which is causing palatal perforation, and lutic glossitis or syphilitic glossitis, which can convert into malignancy. And in congenital syphilis, we have this Hutchinson's triad. You know, this is hypoplasia of incisors, molars, eighth nerve deafness, and intestinal keratitis, right? Also remember oral manifestation of diphtheria. If someone asks, then in diphtheria we have white scrapable lesion which is seen on the gingiva, which begins on the tonsils, and that is called as diphtheric membrane, which is scrapable. So scrapable white sloughing can also be seen in diphtheria, usually on tonsils and gingiva. We have discussed about mucormycosis. It is ulceration on palate in a poorly controlled diabetic patient, and it will be mucormycosis. Remember, the stain which stain this yeast or fungi is PAS stain, this PAS, periodic acid shift. So in mucormycosis, if they ask you which stain will be used, then we use this PAS stain or PAS stain because It is a fungal infection, a chronic fungal infection. Then if someone asks you example of chronic atrophic candidiasis is your denture stomatitis, whereas the example of acute atrophic candidiasis is as written on the slide, antibiotic stomatitis or your antibiotic sore mouth. Remember regarding histiocytosis X also, because histiocytosis X may you find floating teeth appearance as you see in malignancy. And remember, histiocytosis X is characterized by three important diseases, that is literal Siwe disease, hand-shoulder-Christian disease, and eosinophilic granuloma. In all these three diseases, there will be a lot of periodontal destruction, lot of floating teeth appearance, lot of mobile teeth, right? Because they are very destructive lesions. They are metabolic disorders but very destructive. Also remember one important triad of hand-shoulder-Christian disease, where there is bone destruction present, along with exophthalmos is present, and along with this diabetes insipidus is present. So triad of hand-shoulder-Christian disease, of bone destruction, exophthalmos, and diabetes insipidus is also important for you all to remember, right? So this is a quick revision of important questions which are asked in your oral medicine, right? And even in your oral pathology also, right? Okay. Now in this part we will talk about the management of most common oral mucosal lesions, or most common oral diseases which are must know for all of you. For example, simple diseases like leukoplakia,